In Scotland, the climate emergency is demanding urgent action from us all. The impact of climate change is being felt across the country, in our cities, towns and villages. And it's clear we need to adapt the way we live, work and play. A group of small towns have come together to tackle this crisis head-on. This is the story of the Climate Action Towns project. Our journey begins in the small town of Invergordon, set against the backdrop of the Cromarty Firth. This small town in East Ross boasts a diverse industrial history, having been home to the production of whisky, wind turbines, oil rigs and aluminium products throughout the years. But Invergordon isn't just about the past. It's a town steeped in history, but with an eye to a greener future.
I have been involved with the Climate Action Towns for quite a few months now. I've been involved with the planning and delivery of both of the projects in conjunction with Architecture and Design Scotland and the North Highlands and Islands Climate Hub. I thought the climate action workshops were really interesting because we were able to interact with loads of different groups that were doing different projects and different initiatives that they perhaps wouldn't label as climate action, but actually were. So things like growing projects and cutting waste and all that kind of thing that people don't necessarily think that they're part of the climate conversation. Really enjoyed working to a kind of highly place-based approach. An indicator of success of this project, and for me something that I would hope to see, would be more people feeling that they are part of the climate conversation and that their actions actually do help.
I mean, Invergordon's an industrial town, but it's changed slightly the past 5 years with the cruise liner market. There's been a lack of jobs because all the skills that were around the town were all based in the oil industry. And I think people have probably accepted that Invergordon doesn't have to look pretty because it's an industrial town. No, I think there is a difference. When we had, obviously, the COP stuff going on in Glasgow, it was worldwide news. In my opinion, what we need to do is we need to keep the momentum going, and it would be nice if we could have city-type bikes in Invergordon. We could have a water filling station on the high street, going back to the school, reminding young people what we can do each week, each month. The change that Invergordon has to make, maybe compared to some other small Highland town that has maybe been a bit of a more a touristy type town, Invergordon has got a longer journey to take, which is obviously going to be a bigger challenge. But I think the end result will be really worth it.
Nestled in the upper banks of the Cromarty Firth lies Alness, a small but vibrant town in the Highland area of East Ross. Climate Action Towns, in partnership with Highland Adapts and the North Highlands and Islands Climate Hub, are exploring new ways to tackle climate change and engage the local community of Alness.
I grew up in the area. I've got a deep interest in food and farming and how people relate to both of those things. As part of a Scottish-wide project called Dandelion, in Alness we've set up what's called an unexpected garden. So we've set up a veg garden. Primarily what we're trying to do is produce vegetable seeds, or we're in the process of setting up a community kitchen space. We could work this into a model for how local food, people could understand how to produce local food. Climate change is going to lead to us having to change the way we practice farming in dramatic ways that we probably haven't seen for generations. It's not entirely clear what's happening from one spring to the next, whether there are wet spells, whether there are dry spells. It changes very rapidly from year to year. I think it's very, very important that whatever happens, people are still involved in producing food.
Yeah, I think it's really important that businesses and communities tie together and work jointly together. So we have an ambitious goal of reaching carbon net zero by 2030, and if we don't do it, no one's going to do it. As a small community, there's real opportunities for us, especially geographically where we are. For instance, we do salmon and trout, so our factories are cold. So we waste heat. That heat could go somewhere else, but we have no use for it. So working together as a community, we can have bigger, bolder plans around how do we do energy for the whole community So my biggest hope is that, for instance, around energy, with Cromarty and the opportunities that gives us, that we can become not only a leading climate action town, but also show the rest of Scotland what the art of the possible is in terms of community action.
Annan is a small market town in Dumfries and Galloway, southwest Scotland. For centuries, Annan's fortunes were tied to the river that gave it life, with the town evolving from a simple port to a hub of industry and innovation. Annan's harbour may be quiet now, but a committed group of locals are working tirelessly to put the town back on the map, with climate actions at the heart of this journey.
Climate change is climbing up the agenda, largely at the prompting of the next generation. They understand it a little better than we do. We've seen our river, it used to take a couple of days after heavy rain to come into spate. Now it spates, within 8 hours. And just last year we had the biggest ever flood we've seen, which swept away 2 of our very, very important footbridges, which is a massive loss to the community because these provided sort of 2, 4, 6 mile walks. And they're a great loss, and there's community groups working very hard to get them reinstated. My particular hope, obviously being Harbour Development Officer, is to see the harbour reinstated as a hub, both economic and social for the community. So lots of families have links to the harbour, they look at it fondly. It's in recent years fallen into a bit of neglect because of lack of governance, really. And the Action Group have got very ambitious plans. We've already purchased a warehouse, we've purchased some land, and we're working with the council to get a asset transfer to take control of the quayside. The quayside will give us a place to hold community events. Inherent in all of that is our consciousness of global warming and climate change, and indeed loss of biodiversity, and we've got all of those things, if you like, ticked within our plan. We're hoping that Campbeltown, Annan, will be the platform that we can use to get people involved with citizen science projects so that they can understand climate change. We see ourselves, if you like, at the forefront of the battle against climate change, because what we're going to do, we'll live beside a river that from time to time floods when the tide comes in. We're not going to abandon the infrastructure that we've got. We just have to learn ways of living with it. We don't want to be told we can't do things. We want to find solutions and make them happen.
In West Lothian, a post-industrial town by the name of Blackburn quietly awaits discovery. Today, Blackburn is home to a generation of passionate young people. With the help of Blackburn Future Group, Community Action Blackburn and West Lothian Council, along with the support of Architecture and Design Scotland, they want to change the future, starting in their own backyard.
Climate change will affect our whole future. We will see the effects of it. From the project we've taken part in, I've learned that Blackburn could be flooded in a few years' time. Well, not a few, quite in a while, but we could live to experience that. So I feel like we'll be the ones living through the effects instead of all the adults, so it's more relevant to us than anyone else.
I just feel like a lot of people, like obviously in small communities, you can tend to find a lot of small-minded people because of the environment that they've grown up in. I do feel like people just disregard it because they're like, oh, it doesn't affect me. But people obviously, like we said before, just to reiterate, it's the younger generation's problem as a result of what the adults have done. So it's not just our responsibility because it's our future. The adults need to, they need to say, oh, we were part of this problem, so we need to help people solve it.
We'd obviously talk about it in school a lot and they'd say we need to make changes, but to people who are trying to make a change, we didn't actually get to talk to them or suggest ideas until obviously changing Blackburn.
Yeah, I feel like we don't want the next generation of younger people who are going to grow up in Blackburn. We don't want them to have the same experiences that we've had here, obviously feeling unsafe and litter and just everything that we want to change about Blackburn. We want to change it for a reason, not only because we could help ourselves, because we could help other people save themselves from said experiences.
For thousands of years, people have been taking care of our planet, and the generation before us has started to turn it into an absolute dump. So the young generation, we have to handle all that. We have to just live in a world we wouldn't know what it was like before.
Well, I think clubs like Change in Blackburn are really important, so young people can feel like they have a voice and that they're being listened to, because when I first started coming, I thought I wouldn't feel like I was really being listened to about my opinions, but ever since I joined, I've just felt really included with opinions, and I think there should be more. If I had a wish for Blackburn, I would like to make Blackburn a nicer place, so people look at it and think that they would want to come to Blackburn. Maybe try and persuade people to change the way they think and look at Blackburn.
This is our place we live in. We live here, and to see people not taking care of our home, it just makes me feel so upset. Whole planet Earth is being destroyed, and they're always saying there's nothing you can really do about it, but things like these, we can do something about it. People need to start listening to this generation before it's far too late.
Located in the heart of Scotland's central belt, Holytown is a town known for its close-knit community. Aiming to bring about positive change in Holytown, Architecture Design Scotland has teamed up with North Lanarkshire Council, Health and Social Care North Lanarkshire, Voluntary Action North Lanarkshire Partnerships, Action and Climate Together Now initiative, local businesses and Climate Ready Clyde.
What do I like about Holytown? My wife and her sister and her pals, they started a Holytown Community Centre. To me, that's the best thing in Holytown just now, because my grandkids, especially my 3 granddaughters, they play football, so they're down there most weekends. Your pubs are all shut down. We need money to regenerate Holytown. Holytown, when I came here, I could get a bus to Glasgow, I could get a bus to Ayr, a bus to Edinburgh. See now, I have to wait in one bus to go to Belsall for 1 hour. The village is just about to plot, you know. There's always things pop up, like climate change. It's man-made, everybody knows that. I'd like to think my grandkids could have a better upbringing than what we did. They should have more a variety in life.
I like the town generally, right? There's lots of lovely people here, lots of nice friends that you can make. We want to see the town develop. We want to see it interaction, but there's nothing here that this town provides. We have increased rainfall at really unusual times in the year. Just down Sherrill Road, there's a burn. If we get increased rainfall, well, that whole area is flooded. Vehicles can't get through, buses can't get through, again affecting the local community. I want to help develop this community. I want to bring more businesses in. What we need is to create an interest such that other individuals will get involved and see where it goes from there.
The town of Stevenston rests on the coast of North Ayrshire. With an industrial heritage, it is now home to 2 local nature reserves. Climate Action Towns is working with community groups to develop and include climate change focused actions in the community-led action plan and place plan.
Approximately a year ago, I was advised that Stevenston had been selected as one of 7 climate action towns. Stevenston being a coastal town, we have rising sea levels, erosion of our beach, and in the last 2 or 3 years, we've had some serious, considerable flooding due to ageing infrastructure and problems with our local housing. I think we really need to reach out to schools, as many community groups as we can, even sheltered housing complex and for elderly. It involves us all. It's not just for someone else. I would certainly like to see more active travel and transport. I would also like to see more carbon zero activities and changes. I also hope that our time is not wasted and we see proper funding and that we can really make a difference. Also, Long-term residents of Stevenston have experienced change and have the local knowledge. When communities are empowered, there's certainly greater participation in local democracy.
Campbeltown is a small port at the south of the Kintyre Peninsula on the Atlantic west coast of Scotland. The collaborative work between Architecture Design Scotland, South Kintyre Development Trust, Campbeltown Community Council and Inspire Alba offers hope for positive change in this resilient town.
Campbeltown, I think, is unique in that the people of Campbeltown is a very strong community. I think because we are quite isolated from the central belt of Scotland, people tend to look after each other. In times of crisis, that's been very noticeable. Just prior to the COVID pandemic, we realised as a community council that we needed to instigate a new Campbeltown community development plan for the area. So we devised questionnaires and we distributed them, and we did receive responses, but that time COVID had hit, so it was getting more and more difficult to engage with the local community. Once we were nominated as a climate action town, it gave us access to working with Architecture and Design Scotland, and they helped the Community Council and our partners, South Kintyre Development Trust and Inspire Alba, to take the seedlings of the development plan and to help us make it into something more tangible. They managed to organise workshops, remote workshops, which we didn't have the capacity to do, and we now have a development plan for the next 5 years. Well, change is difficult. Change is always difficult, and it's in people's mindsets. Things like travel, recycling, energy use, that's all difficult, and it's not going to happen very quickly. I think the children, it's fair to say, know more about climate change than most adults, and that's an exciting prospect for the future, that as children grow up and have developed good habits at school, then they take that into their adulthood.
Campbeltown is very isolated. It's the most isolated town in the entirety of the UK. I've got 3 children here who are all, well, one of them's still at university and the other 2 have just left. For them to have the opportunity to be able to live in Campbeltown long term and bring their own families up here and, you know, purchase a house here, that's getting more difficult, you know, as time goes on. So I'd like to see certainly more economic development going on in the town. So we need jobs here in order to sustain families, that's the thing. All we can do as a development trust is continually try and put in place projects to help improve the lives of people. So we started to speak to Architecture and Design Scotland, and we looked at climate change as being an integral part of all of the future activity that goes on here in this area. So because any plans that we have, you know, for increasing jobs in tourism and, you know, any of those types of things rely on a kind of stable, steady climate, and like there not to be major, like, you know, climatic events or anything like that to happen here. We've suffered from this before, you know, even small climatic events like, you know, a large snowfall in one day can completely block this town and this whole area. So that's what we're currently in the process of doing is to try and address these actions that were identified by the community in an individual way, you know, so we go through the list and say, right, well, what can we do about this? Who are the key players in this area? Do we need to speak to the council about it? Is there other groups that we have to work with in order to make these things happen? And that's basically what we do now. I mean, I was brought up in a housing estate in Glasgow, like Drumchapel's, one of the largest housing estates in Europe. Where I was brought up, things were a bit rough, and I think the real only option open to you is either to just accept things are just going to be bad, or you say that, well, let's do something about this and try and make things better. I live here, you know, my family are here. Now, this is where I make my money, this is where all my friends are, this is where I have my social life. I want this town to be as good a place as it can possibly be.
As Scotland's towns emerge from the realities of the pandemic, they're confronted with a wide range of barriers. We believe that through a place-based approach to working together, communities can face these challenges.